I'm an English teacher in Korea, but I won't tell you where I teach in order to protect the identity of both the students and teachers. I'm half Korean and moved to Korea from the States about a year ago so I could learn more about the Korean culture. Anyway, ever since I moved here, I've been experiencing some weird stuff, things that I can't explain. Here are just some of the things that I experienced, or others I know experienced. The second week of me teaching at the school, I began to hear this clicking sound, like somebody clicking their tongue, but louder. I looked around my classroom to see if anybody else noticed it, but they didn't seem to, so I shrugged it off. Later though, in the teacher's lounge, I asked another English teacher if she ever heard the clicking noise. She nods her head and then proceeds to tell me about something that happened to her. About 2 years ago, the classroom she taught in was being renovated, so her and several other teachers were moved to a wing of the school that had not been used in 5 years. To get an idea of what the school looks like, just picture the high school in the Korean horror movie, Whispering Corridors, and you'll know what I'm talking about. Anyway, the teacher had to go to the bathroom, and the girls' bathroom was located on the abandoned floor upstairs. She stepped out of the classroom, turned right and rounded the stairwell until she reached the top and looked down at the long abandoned hallway, which made her feel uneasy. As she quickly entered the bathroom, she noticed the doors to all 5 stalls were opened, so she knew she was alone. She entered the first stall to do her business, and just as she was about to sit down, she began to hear a clicking noise. Looking through the cracks in the stall, she notices somebody standing outside. At this point, she freaks out, and so she quickly gets up, exits the stall, and as she does, she sees a girl standing there with her head down, swaying from side to side. Feeling a bit creeped out, she nervously asked the girl in Korean if she was okay, but no answer. Again, she asks the girl if she was okay, and this time the girl stops swaying, slowly lifts her head, and lets out a blood-curdling wail. Needless to say, she never used that bathroom again, but it was hard to avoid entirely because it was situated right above her classroom, and so, she would often hear footsteps. Other times, she would hear the water running or the toilets flushing, and the ceiling in her class would always drip water, even after the water was turned off. One time, her class was taking a test, and all of a sudden they were interrupted by an ear-piercing scream coming from the bathroom. This freaked her students out, so she immediately notified security and they went up to investigate, but found nothing. After that incident, the floor was closed off for good. Another teacher who's Korean and speaks English really well told me this story. Last year, in another wing of the school, one of her students had to go to the bathroom. 5 minutes later, the student comes running back to the classroom, visibly shaken and screaming. Finally, after calming the student down, the teacher notified security, and when they arrived, she accompanied them to the bathroom. She told me that when they entered the bathroom, they found clumps of black hair, some of it on the floor and some of it in the toilets. As for the student, well, she wasn't the same after that incident and never told the teacher what happened to her that day in the bathroom. This last story I'm going to share with you actually happened to me. It was around the 3rd month of me teaching at this school when the principal asked me to tutor some of the students after school. I received the list of all the students that were in my class, and there was 15 in total. On my first afternoon of tutoring, I began counting the students and noticed there were 16. Thinking the school added another student without telling me, I looked down at my list and saw there were only supposed to be 15 in my class. Puzzled, I recounted, and this time there were only 15 students. I never found out who the 16th student was, and I really didn't want to find out either. Well, I have a meeting tomorrow, so I'll have to wrap it up for now, but I definitely have more stories to share with you at a later time. Okay guys, as promised, here are some more of the strange things I've encountered in Korea. Several months ago, I was taking the train home from work. It was around 9 at night, and the Busan metro station was practically empty. As I began walking towards my train, I began to hear the sound of dragging feet behind me. Scared, I began to quicken my pace and noticed that the footsteps behind me began to move at a faster pace. Panicked, I began to run, and after reaching my train, I quickly jumped in, and it was then that I was met with a gruesome sight. Inside the train's car, I saw at least a dozen mangled bodies. I saw blood on the walls, and I could hear all the injured passengers moaning in pain as they cried out for help. It was at this point I began to feel dizzy, and soon after, I passed out. When I finally came to, I realized that all the bodies were gone and that the car looked normal again, like it was never in an accident in the first place. Later, I did some research and found out that about 20 years ago, there was a train that derailed at the Busan Metro, killing 12 people and injuring 20 more. And they say now the train station is haunted by those people who were killed in that tragic accident. Some people claim to hear feet dragging near Platform 8, especially at night, while others claim to hear a loud crash, only to find the tracks empty of any train. Workers at the Busan Metro also report experiencing strange things. Like one day a worker claimed that he saw a young woman that appeared to be injured standing in the middle of the tracks with her head down. When he approached her to see if she was okay, she vanished. There is also a rumor of a strange creature that roams the subterranean part of the train station near Platform 4. Several people have reported being attacked by this creature, and witnesses describe it as being pale-skinned with no hair and glowing red eyes. Nobody knows when the creature first appeared at the station, but it's rumored that the creature was once a man that was cursed for his misdeeds. The other story I'm about to tell you involves another teacher at my school. About 6 months ago or so, this particular teacher was at the Busan Metro, waiting for her train to arrive. It was late at night, so there were only a few other people waiting on the platform with her. When the train finally arrived, she stepped into the train and noticed that she was the only person in the car. As the train started to move, she started to doze off, and when she opened her eyes a few minutes later, she noticed that there was an elderly man wearing an old tweed suit sitting straight across from her. She felt him staring at her, making her feel a bit uneasy, causing her to get up and move to another seat. As she sat down, she turned back to see if the man was still staring at her, but he was gone. This last story happened to be a security guard at my school, who used to be a security supervisor in the Busan Metro. Late one night, he was looking at the security monitors when he noticed people standing on Platform 8. Puzzled, he quickly radioed into the guard that was patrolling the area and asked him if he saw any people. Confused, the guard radios in to tell him that, in fact, the platform was empty and the station was supposed to be closed for the night. The security supervisor, still seeing the people on the platform, radios to the patrolling guard again to ask him if he was playing a prank on him, and before the guard could answer, the security supervisor glances over at the monitors and saw that the platform was now empty. That was only one of many experiences he had on Platform 8, but I'll save these stories for another time. Well, I guess I'll wrap it up for now because I'm not feeling well, but I will return later with some more of my scary experiences from Korea when I feel better. In truth, something happened to me last night that I feel I need to tell you. I'm still a bit shaken up by it, but I feel like I need to get it off my chest, so here goes. Last night I was at the school, prepping assignments for the next day when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside of my classroom. Thinking that it was either the janitor or the security guard, I shrugged it off and went about my business. An hour later, as I was finishing up the last of my assignments, the lights in the classroom began to flicker. Then for some reason, I looked towards the middle of the classroom and see a girl sitting on one of the desks with her head down. Although something felt off about her. I thought it was just a student that got locked in. I wanted to confront her, but as soon as I stood up from my desk, the lights go out, and now it's completely dark in the classroom. I felt my heart race as I tried to suppress my fear. Then I heard the same clicking sound from before as I looked at the girl to see if she was okay. I saw that she was now standing a few feet away from my desk. I knew then she was no student. Terrified, I ran out of the classroom screaming. As I was running down the hallway, I could clearly hear footsteps behind me, but they weren't running. I started screaming for help, hoping that either the security guard or the janitor would hear me. As I continued to run, I felt something on my back and my legs getting heavy. My vision started to blur, and just before I fainted, I could hear the girl's laughter throughout the hallway. The guard found me a few minutes later, and only when I was able to stand up again, we went back to the classroom to investigate, and to no surprise, found that it was now empty. Today, I took the day off. but later on I'll call the school up to see if they could assign me to another classroom. Until then, I think I'll go get some rest, but I'll try to keep you guys posted. Okay, guys, something happened to me a couple of days ago that I want to share with you. Here goes. It was after school about 2 days ago, when I was told by the principal to move some of the older and damaged chairs to the basement. The school was trying to replace the old chairs due to an accident last week. Anyway, to get an idea of what the basement is like, well, just imagine the abandoned part of the school I told you about earlier, add some creep factor in the mix, and you'll know what I'm talking about. In fact, the entrance to the basement is situated right next to the now closed-off wing that had since been boarded up due to the last incident. Anyway, I, along with 3 other teachers, were moving the chairs into the basement using an old elevator. It's located right next to the stairwell leading downstairs. After we loaded the elevator with the chairs, we stepped in and took the elevator down to the basement. Stepping out, the atmosphere was gloomy and the air was musty, causing us to cough after only a few seconds of being down there. Finally, after our coughing fit was over, curiosity got the better of us and we decided to roam around the dark recesses of the basement, completely forgetting why we were here in the first place. There were only several lights in the basement, so the visibility was very limited, so I took out my phone and used the flashlight. Walking around the basement, I noticed several hallways that were in the shape of a T and what appeared to be several rooms that littered them. Curious, I peered into one of the rooms and I saw several rusty desks and a chalkboard with writing still on it. I began to walk the whole basement and counted 12 classrooms in all. I noticed 4 of the classrooms were located directly under the now closed-off wing of the school. The school either forgot or assumed that none of the students had access to the basement, so they didn't bother boarding these classrooms up. Anyway, walking down the abandoned part of the floor, I saw there was only one light illuminating the entire section. Using my phone, I continued on and slowly studied everything I did. I noticed the bathroom first, which was located on the right side of the hall. When I entered it, I saw that the floor was flooded with stagnant water and sewage which smelled really bad. The bathroom itself was beyond repair with years of built-up grime and the doors of the bathroom stalls nearly falling off their hinges. After I exited the bathroom, I continued down the hall and I noticed my phone began to flicker. As I neared the last classroom at the end of the hall, I began to hear some static coming from my phone. I moved my phone around to try and get a better signal, and that's when the static stopped. Upon entering the classroom, I noticed it appeared to be daylight and that some light was streaming through the basement windows. There were about 20 students sitting in their desks, and all of them were dressed oddly in 50s-style clothing. It felt like I went back in time. I called out to them, but nobody seemed to notice me, and although I could see the students, I couldn't hear them. It felt like I was in some vacuum where all the sound was being sucked out. Not sure if what I was seeing was real or not, I began rubbing my eyes, and when I opened them again, all the students were still there. I stood there in a moment in shock, as I tried to process what the hell I was witnessing. And that's when I heard what sounded like nails on a chalkboard coming from the front of the classroom. As I turned to see what was causing that annoying sound, my heart nearly stopped. What I saw was a female student writing in Korean, "Help me," over and over again on the chalkboard. I screamed loudly and saw that she and the rest of the students had turned their heads towards me. I had no recollection of running out of the classroom, or how I was even able to find the other teachers, but nonetheless they were happy to see me. Apparently, I had been missing for about 3 hours, although I knew I'd only been gone for 30 minutes. The next day, while moving the chairs again, I got brave and decided to go back to the same classroom to see if I was imagining it. When I got there, the classroom was gone, and instead, there was a wall in its place. Later that night, when I got home, I decided to do some investigating and found out that in the 30s and 40s, the school was a hospital. After the hospital closed down, it was turned into a school. 2 years after the school was opened, a fire erupted in the basement, killing 10 students. The cause of the fire was unknown. I also found out that the basement, along with the now closed-off wing, was part of the original school. Oh, and before I forget, one of the teachers in our group also had his own experience that day too. While we were all working, he had to go to the bathroom. Well, walking up the stairs, he heard what sounded like banging coming from nearby. He assumed it was the other teachers banging the chairs around as they moved them, so he shrugged it off, resuming his trip to the bathroom. As he was walking past the boarded wall, he heard loud scratching coming from behind it. At this point, he's scared and runs into the bathroom, which is sort of situated across the basement stairs. Chalking it up to the rats, he finishes in the bathroom and heads back down to the basement. Again, as he's passing by the boarded-up wall, he could hear the scratching sound, but this time, it's accompanied by a girl's pleading voice saying, "Help me," over and over in Korean. Needless to say, he didn't stick around, and instead ran into the basement where he relayed to us what happened. Thinking somehow a student got trapped inside the building, we immediately notified security, where they entered the closed-off wing through a door that was accessible from the basement. Despite a thorough search, though, they never found the girl. I wonder if what I saw and what the other teachers saw is somehow connected. Anyway, that's what's been happening with me. I hope I didn't scare you too much. I'm headed to bed, so I'll end it for now, but I'll try to keep you guys updated because I definitely have more stories for you. Till then, have a good night.
Chronicler here. I would like to thank Gdokim for allowing us to tell their story. If you want to hear more of their story, make sure to subscribe to stay updated on our videos. If you want to read more stories like this one, be sure to check out the author's link in the description and show them some love. If you're interested in having your story narrated, be sure to reach out to our humble overseer as he continues his journey to pull the darkest stories from the infinite depths of the internet. Until next time, fiends, and remember, we are darkness.